We were critically minded. Many of us were well educated, middle class, white Americans. And we could spot something that was hypocritical or something that was authentic. And we stayed with Father because he was authentic. We saw that his life reflected his teachings. And had he not been authentic, we would not have stayed.
Welcome to the Second Advent podcast. Today we have with us Carrie Williams, who's the Director of Education of Sanctuary Church, Head Coordinator of Holy Spirit University. She's a published author with recent books like Jesus and True Father Are One, editor of The Words of True Mother Hyun-Shil Kang, True Parents, Holy Days, she co-authored with David Kanegi, and she also co-authored this past year with Dorrit Smith, Unification, Sanctuary, Blessed Family Traditions. She's also a songwriter, a lifelong teacher, and a good friend and sister. So, Carrie, welcome.
Hi, Anastasia.
I think we want to start from the beginning. How did you come to our church?
Well, it was 1977, just a few years ago. And I met my spiritual father in a coffee shop in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And he walked up at me and said, "Have you ever had a spiritual experience?" And I said, "No, but I'd like to." And he witnessed to me, and I became more and more interested in the words that he was saying. I had so many questions. And shortly thereafter, I went to a series of workshops where the focus was learning the divine principle, which is the central teaching of our church and the central teaching that Father received between the ages of 16 and 25. And it was just, it was an amazing experience, hearing from the principle of creation to the fall of man, to the mission of Messiah, to the second advent. And the more I heard, the more I became aware of the truth of this teaching. But at the same time, there was kind of a bit of a dread in my heart, because I knew that it meant I had to make some major changes in my life and in the direction that I was going. God gave me some experiences that really brought me to become a member of the church. One such experience was a friend of mine. One day, I was feeling kind of lonely for my friends, at home. And one of my friends called me and said, "Carrie, I needed to talk to you, that you need to leave that place because your life is in danger." And this friend of mine, he was spiritual, so I thought he was an expert. He knew about spiritual world. And he said, "Yeah, the spirits have told me that you're in great danger and you should leave." And so I went to one of the directors of the workshop and I said, "Sorry, I got to go." And they go, "What's going on?" I said, I didn't want to tell them that my life was in danger. I said, "I'm sorry, I really need to leave. There's some trouble and I just need to get out of here." And this sister, she opened up the divine principle and she pointed me to read the section on the effects of good spirits and evil spirits. The effects of good spirits are when a good spirit is affecting you, you feel a great sense of peace and of calm, and you just feel, in harmony with everyone. But the effects of evil spirits are, they cause you to feel fear and guilt and anxiety. And all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, that's how I'm feeling. And suddenly I prayed my first real prayer. And I addressed the spirit. I kind of surprised myself with this prayer. I said, "If you come in the name of God to help me become closer to God, closer to Jesus, then please stay with me, continue to guide me. But if you come in the name of evil, if you come in the name of someone who's trying to take me away from God's house, then be gone. I want nothing to do with you." And then I opened my eyes, and then this feeling of great peace came over me. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is not a game. This is real life. A second experience I had that was really the moment in which I um, decided to join was when I was hearing the Last 400 Years lecture. And it's very interesting. God had prepared me by prior to coming to the workshop. For some reason, I was very interested in understanding more about my ancestry, and particularly my Jewish, Eastern European, Russian ancestors, especially those that had lived in Latvia. And in this last 400-year lecture, the lecture very eloquently talked about what happened to Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia after World War II, and how it was annexed into the Soviet Union, and how they suffered under communism for so many years. And at that moment, I thought, oh my goodness, I have to give my life for the sake of freedom. I have to give my life to help these ancestors be totally free and have the people that are living there now be totally free. And it was an amazing experience. And at that time, then the woman sitting next to me said, Carrie, during the lecture, I was going to tell the lecturer to close the blinds because there was incredibly brilliant light coming through the window and it was really hurting my eyes. And so I wanted that light to be dimmed. She said, then I looked to the window and it wasn't coming from the window. It was coming from you. So my spiritual body was on fire. And once again, I realized the seriousness of what was being talked about. And so I gave my life to God. I gave my life to Father at that point. I knew at that time, people would, if you asked who is Reverend Moon the Messiah, they would never tell you that you have to pray about it. But I put two and two together, and so I joined. Such a miracle to be living on the East Coast in the Unification Church in the 70s and 80s, because that was the focus of Father's ministry then. He lived at East Garden every Sunday at Belvedere. We could come see him. I was in the New Hope Singers. We performed in the Manhattan Center. He would come to the holidays, and afterwards he would come up on stage. He would come up on stage, and I wish you could, oh, Anastasia, you would have loved it. He would come up on stage and he would sing. He sang Danny Boy. He sang Country Roads. He embraced our culture. He won our hearts. But he also would sing Korean songs, and these Korean elders would come up on stage. They'd can't sing what they sang, but it was very free, and he was very limber. He was very athletic, and then he would always close with singing "Oh Maya." That's why I'm teaching it now to the Sunday school here in Tennessee. The children need to know "Oh Maya Nunaya." But the first time I saw Father was November of Children's Day, and we came down from Boston to the New Yorker to the Manhattan Center. Father walked on stage, and I can't explain it, but when he walked on stage, I thought, this is my Father. This is my Father. And he spoke very truthfully, very powerfully. And unfortunately, while he was speaking, yours truly got a little sleepy. And as I was dozing a little bit, I had a vision of Father. And in my vision, he had red hair, and he winked at me. And so then I woke up, and that was an unforgettable first experience with Father.
Would you say that the teachings, the divine principle, and all that you were learning really just there was no doubt in your mind when you met him, you knew who he was? That is
a gift. That is a gift that God gave me. But Father didn't want a fan club. He didn't. He was very charismatic. People just loved to be around him. But the first thing that you met was the divine principle. The first thing that you met was the teachings. And he always brought us back to the principle. He would say, at one point he said, I think everybody in the movement should be kidnapped. Because he did it. He said that. He wanted us there because we believed in what we were doing. And the longer I was with him, the more I experienced how his words and his actions matched. And, we, young people who joined, we weren't the first choice, second choice, third choice of God. Maybe we were fifth, sixth, seventh. But the point I want to make is we were critically minded. Many of us were well educated, middle class, white Americans. And we could spot something that was hypocritical or something that was authentic. And we stayed with Father because he was authentic. We saw that his life reflected his teachings. And had he not been authentic, we would not have stayed. At the same time, I think without growing spiritually, without deepening your relationship with God, without deepening your understanding of the truth, that at some point, without having a deeper relationship with Father, unfortunately, many people fell away. But I'm a deeper believer in Father now as the second coming of Christ and as the returning Jesus than I ever have.
Well, that's really wonderful. And, Carrie, a lot of people, moving forward, obviously the physical father, his being is past. So for future people like myself, we have his work. But one of the things that I've always said in meeting my brothers and sisters who are affiliated with the church is I almost sense that like each one of you has a special kind of like superpower. Like the day I met you, the first day I came to church and I was meeting everyone, I don't know if I told you this or not, but you were so into what you were doing. I said, oh, this woman wants nothing to do with me. And then, of course, I'd love you more than ever because I realized your superpower was really knowing how to hone in and problem solve and organize and create. And you were such an artist, and you are, in the way you write and in your music. And after meeting people, of all calibers, like there's some similarities, but there's that special talent that each one has that I almost sense, and that's the beauty of it, that I know true Father through each and every one of you. I have a little sense of humor. And one day you had said to me, "Oh, true Father would have loved you." He was a very funny man. It touched me so much that I felt like he was in the room.
When I joined the New Hope Singers in December of 1978, Father came down to visit us. We were living in the Washington Church, and there's this one sister there. She was a black sister, and he goes, "What are you doing here? You're a New York girl. You're a New Yorker. What are you doing here?" Father loved New York so much, Anastasia. I often think about that. In 1979, when we moved to New York, you were a 9-year-old girl running around Queens, and I was visiting, knocking on the doors of home church, doing my best to tell people about Father.
One of the honors I had, which was this was a day I'll never forget. It was a week before the 2024 election. It was a glorious, beautiful, sunny day. You, Dr. Richard Panzer, and a few of our brothers and sisters got into my Trump truck. And we drove. We had a condition that we were going to do 7 times around Madison Square Garden where President Trump was. And lo and behold, the traffic was so bad, but it had an opportunity for us for me anyway, to hear the great stories. And I remember you saying, "There's the New Yorker." And then you and the ladies were talking about the day that, you had the blessing and everything. I just envisioned the entire thing as if I was there. And it was one of the most beautiful historical events. Although, our condition didn't really get through 7 times because it was just a long day, but 3 was good. I think God was happy because he won. So, but the special memories, my gosh, wow, and how much he loved New York. That's something else. And this was a man who was constantly tortured, right, from what they did to him. And you would think, nowadays, certain people, they give up after being tortured once, they fall apart. And yet, he became stronger after each battle. I mean, that's incredible.
Amazing strength. And going to New York, that's the center of power. And then towards the end of his life, he went to Las Vegas, Sin City, because he is a strategist. If he can go to the place that Satan loves the most and love it more than Satan does, then he can bring victory. It was I can't remember if it was the late 70s or early 80s. I think about the Grand Ballroom and being in there. Well, that's right. It was introduced to my husband. That's a whole story in of itself. But just to show you Father's character, when Donald Frazier had led a congressional committee to investigate the Unification Church's ties with the KCIA, which turned out to be nothing, but it cost a lot of time and money and energy from our unification movement. And when it turned out that all the investigation was dropped, then we all met in a celebratory event with Father in the Grand Ballroom. And as we were sitting there and Father was talking, suddenly he stopped and he said, "How many of you prayed for Donald Frazier?" And there was a dead silence in the room. But he was such a man. He was such a man, always praying and loving his enemy and teaching us to do the same. Teaching us to do the same. I spent many a day selling flowers at stoplights, West 58th Street. I called that my celebrity stoplight, because I met different celebrities there. I met Rod Stewart there once, Faye Dunaway, David Frost, and there's this one woman who walked her dog on the street for years. Every time she saw me, she would yell at me, she would curse me. And I just always decided I'm just going to love this woman. I'm just going to always say nice things to her. And that's what happened. And then we left New York. We went traveling missionaries up and down the East Coast. And then we were gone about, I don't know, almost a year. And we came back. And I went back to my celebrity stoplight to fundraise. And I saw this woman again with her dog. She was so happy to see me. I was so happy to see her. We were like embraced like old friends. So that's the beauty of loving when hatred comes your way. So, that's just one little story, but that's what Father taught us. He really lived and preached what Jesus taught. I have to share something that probably most people don't know. There's a beautiful speech by Wonpil Kim about the testimony of Father's early life. And he tells the story of coming from Pyongyang down to Busan. While he was giving that speech, while we were sitting in the Grand Ballroom listening to him, Father came through a side door and was sitting and listening to Reverend Kim giving the speech. He was listening to him giving this testimony. And Wonpil Kim realized, when he realized Father was there, he stopped. He stopped. And Father said, no, keep going. And so he kept going. I just thought it was a beautiful time where Father was taking object position to hearing the story of the journey south. Another unforgettable experience that really shows you Father's heart. It was in the Grand Ballroom, and Father had us all together, and he had different people come up and give testimonies. And one of the American church leaders came up and started crying. He was confessing. He chose this moment to confess. And he talked about, this was a blessed brother who had been a leader in the church for many years, an early American member. And he confessed that when he was on an airplane, without his wife. He had put his hand on the leg of the woman next to him. That's all he did, but it was unprincipled. And Father was sitting there in the room, and this brother confessed and started crying and repenting. And I looked over at Father. Father's head was down, and there were tears streaming from his eyes. Father was feeling what this brother felt and repenting along with him. I wish you could have seen Father pray as he would pray every God's Day Eve at midnight. It would begin with Father's prayer. And Anastasia, when I saw Father pray, it was like a child. Father was always so manly, so masculine. But when Father prayed at midnight to begin the new year, and he prayed, all I can say is like he would be crying and his face was like a child talking to his father, because that's who he was. He was a child talking to his father. And I look forward to the day soon when all of these videos can be released, because they belong to all of humankind. So people can really experience the heart of this man. Because of Father, I know the value of life. I know what's important. And I can really call you my sister. And the work that we did together, it was for something greater than ourselves, and that's our treasure. I'm sorry that most of the people that I was with at the seminary and was with all my years in the church, aren't with Father right now. Because to be with Father, you have to be attending the second king, his lineage. But they'll come back. They just went on a side trip.
The beautiful
time we have Anastasia here helping us.
The beautiful thing is, obviously, I didn't meet. He wasn't alive when I came to the church, Father. But Second King was my pastor. I walked into his sermon, and I cried probably for a good 3 months every Sunday during the sermon, because I couldn't believe what I was hearing. And this was because he, and his brother Cook Janem, they were trained. They understood their father. Their father gave them everything, gave Second King everything. And I was so emotionally connected. I started living again. And that's why I was crying, because I started recognizing what faith was, and what I was searching for was truth. I think that's the key. If you're really searching, then you're open to what God has to give you. And I'm so proud of Second King, especially right now with the Queen, what he's doing in Taiwan. Being the missionary that his father always was, going everywhere. And it's not easy. Nobody wants to leave home. Am I right, Carrie? How many times did you have to leave? It's not easy, right?
Wasn't easy for Elisha. When Elijah came, hey, I need you to help me. He got up and left, right? Wasn't easy for Abraham. Yeah. That's the history, isn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely. But, the education key is so important. I'm not surprised at all that you're head coordinator of the Holy Spirit University. What are some of the things that, if you had to, for people who are listening to this, what are some of the classes that you feel that people can start off really learning about your father?
Well, the beauty of Holy Spirit University, it's a mainly an online small group ministry that was actually started by the second king and queen 10 years ago. And the king graciously gave the name Holy Spirit University. And the very first class that we had was studying Father's early speeches. And I remember when we first got together, I remember the second king saying, in the church, we always talked about how Jesus, didn't come to die on the cross. That was a secondary dispensation. He said, but what we often forgot was Jesus did die on the cross for our sake. And so, we, through Holy Spirit University, it's really developing an everyday relationship with Christ. And I did write a book, Jesus and True Father Are One. They have the same logos. They have the same, they come from the seed of God. And one thing I love so much about the second king is he really is a zero before Christ. When he gives all the glory and honor to Father and to God, he means it. And but he made a lot of effort to develop in his life of faith. I'll never forget when he became, Father gave him the international presidency responsibility. And I remember when listening to his sermons from Korea, and I remember him saying, we don't hold anything against you, first generation. We don't have any resentment against you. We love you. We appreciate you. He went his own journey of not being raised by his parents. I remember I was dean of students and we were visiting the seminary graduates. We're visiting True Father at East Garden. We were there was a little bowling alley on one of the floors. We were there in the bowling alley. And I remember Hyungjinim coming in. He was just a little guy. And he came when the true children would come home, they would bow before true parents, true father. And he wanted to be with Father. And I remember Father gently kind of pushing him away because Father was busy then. So he had the same kind of upbringing of not being raised by his parents, but he overcame. He went his own life of faith path to really be victorious in being a real follower of Christ. So I just think it's such a wonderful role model for each and every one of us to continue to follow True Father. That's why even though you weren't able to be with Father in the flesh, Anastasia, I believe you can be closer to him than I am. And I mean that with my whole heart. I just really want to encourage, everyone to develop their own relationship with Father. And that's what the Holy Spirit University is all about. We study Father's words. The classes have to be Bible-centered and Bible-based and Christ-centered. And which is how we want to live our lives. So there's a lot of freedom. Greg Knowles teaching a class now about healthy God-centered diet, which is based on the Bible. So we live a life for Christ in every facet.
Carrie, thank you so much for sharing with our viewers this historical testimony, really, of your life and how you've come here and just it's so inspirational to me, and I'm sure to others, to really continue to learn and to be open about our faith and what it can do for us. So thank you again, Carrie. I love you.
Thanks
and I miss you terribly.
I love you too, sister.